Welcome back. In the previous lecture, we had covered if statement and if else statement. Let's now cover if else statement. When we have to test more than two scenarios, then implementing logic using if else statement is not easy. In such scenarios, we have if else statement. Let us check the syntax of if else statement. It starts with if boolean expression, then block of statements, then else if boolean expression, block of statements, and finally else, and then block of statements. Here you can have more than one else if blocks, and else block is optional over here. If you want, you can completely omit it. Now let us check the logic behind if else block. So if this boolean expression is true, execute these statements and come out of the whole if else block. Don't check for other else if or else block. But if this boolean expression is false, check for the boolean expression corresponding to first else if block. If this is true, execute these statements and come out of the whole block. But if it is false, go and check another else if blocks if available. But if more else if blocks are not available, then execute the code inside else block. One point to remember here is that if any of the boolean expression is true, then remaining boolean expressions will never be checked for the same if else block. In this case, if this is true, then no more checks for the whole block. But if this is false, go ahead for other checks. Let us see a problem statement. We have to write a program to implement following logic. If r is less than 12 noon, then greet the user with good morning message. If r is greater than or equals to 12 noon but less than 15, that is 3 p.m., greet with good afternoon. And finally, if r is greater than or equal to 15, that is 3 p.m., greet the user with good evening. We can solve it in multiple ways. Let us check the first one by using if statements only. I have already implemented the code to save some time. So in this example, I have used only if statements, no else or else ifs. I have a byte variable r, initial value is 11. So the first requirement is if r is less than 12 noon, greet with good morning message. So I've implemented this logic. If r is less than 12, then system.out.println good morning. The second requirement is if r is greater than or equals to 12, if r is greater than or equals to 12 but less than 15 and r is less than 15, then greet with good afternoon. So system.out.println good afternoon. And the final one is if r is greater than or equals to 15, that is 3 p.m., greet with good evening. If r is greater than or equals to 15, greet the user with good evening. Let me test it. First value for 11, so good morning should get printed. Right click, run as Java application. Good morning is getting printed. Second value is 13. This will be false, but this will be true because 13 is greater than or equals to 12 and less than 15. Right click, run as Java application. It is correctly printing good afternoon. And finally, let us check for 16. So 16 is greater than or equals to 15, which is true. So in this case, I should get good evening message. So right click, run as Java application, good evening. This is very simple. I have used only if statements. Now let us check another implementation using if else statements. Let us open another file. Now let's check this logic. If r is less than 12 noon, greet with good morning message. It is same as previous example. If r is less than 12, greet the user with good morning. Now what is the meaning of else block in this case? Else block means if r is not less than 12, which is if r is greater than equals to 12. Now let us concentrate on second condition. Second condition is if r is greater than or equals to 12 and r is less than 15. But r is greater than equals to 12 is already true inside else block. So it will be redundant to check r is greater than equals to 12 over here. Though no harm, but it is a redundant statement. So we can remove it. R is less than 15 is sufficient for this statement. Now this if block has a corresponding else block. This is the inner else block. Now this else block in this case will cater to the condition r is greater than equals to 15 because corresponding if block checks if r is less than 15. So else is just opposite of if. Let us verify this code. When r value is 11, good morning should get printed. Right click, run as Java application. Good morning. When R value is 13, good afternoon should get printed. Good afternoon. When R value is 16, good evening should get printed. Good evening. Finally, let us implement the same logic using if, else if and else block. Now first condition, if R is less than 12 noon, greet with good morning. This is same for all the three implementation. Now the second condition is if R is greater than or equals to 12 but less than 15, which is 3 p.m. Now in this case there is no need to implement R is greater than equals to 12 ampersand ampersand. Now this check is redundant. Else if block means all the cases other than the previous check. Previous check in this case is R is less than 12. So other cases are R is greater than equals to 12. So in this case we do not need to explicitly check for R is greater than equals to 12. Now the else block is for all the cases other than previous if and else if, which means R is greater than equals to 15. So the first check is R is less than 12. Opposite of this will be R is greater than equals to 12. Now this case has R is greater than equals to 12 and R is less than 15. So finally we are left with only one set of values, that is R is greater than equals to 15. Let us now verify this. When the value of R is 11, right click, run as Java application. Good morning. When the value of R is 13, it should print good afternoon. So right click, run as Java application, good afternoon. And finally for 16, it should print good evening. Right click, run as Java application, good evening. So what's the difference between these three implementation? The first implementation in which we used only if statements, the second implementation in which we used if else blocks, and the third implementation in which we used if else if and else blocks. In the first one, all the three if statements will be checked for one particular R. So if R equals to 11, first if will be checked. Here this boolean expression is true, hence this statement will get printed. Then the second if will be checked, is 11 greater than equals to 12? This is false, so no output in this case. This will not get executed. And finally, the third if statement will also be checked. Is 11 greater than equals to 15? False, so this statement will also not get printed. In this case, even though the first boolean expression was true and the first if statement was executed successfully, Java runtime did 2 extra checks. So it is not very efficient solution, but it is a legal solution because we are getting the correct output. Second and third implementations are same, except that third one is more readable and preferred choice if we have to test more than 3 conditions. Over here we have tested 3 scenarios, but what if we had to test 5 scenarios? In that case, normal if else would become really complex. So whenever you have to implement 3 or more scenarios, then implement the logic using if, else if and else. With this we have come to an end. In the next lecture, I will cover switch case. Till then, happy coding.